Live from the Ram Cave, I'm Joe Terosian, and this is Ram View, the August 18th, 2022 edition, brought to you by Temple City Auto Repair. If you need some help with an auto issue, then you need some John and Henry at Temple City Auto Repair. Look up TempleCityAutoRepair.com and get connected with these guys. All right, really happy to be back here. It's Thursday. I did yesterday's show thinking it was Thursday. And I thought today was going to be Friday, but then it was explained to me at dinner that this is actually Thursday, or was going to be Thursday. So I still got another show to do tomorrow, which I'm kind of excited about, as the NFL season keeps trucking along, and we get all the good news, bad news, and news in general about what's taking place around the league. And of course, Deshaun Watson, 11 games, 5 rocks. Brown season over, and unless Jacoby Brissett can suddenly become Kurt Warner, which is something he's never done in Miami or Indianapolis, the Brown season is pretty much toast, right? I mean, I'm not saying they're going to be bad, but I'm not saying they're going to be good. And then the other thing that surprised me about the Deshaun Watson thing is the press conference, right? Why the press conference, right? The Browns already gave their opinion on Watson, right? And they did that when they guaranteed him 230 rocks. Absolutely, fully guaranteed. That tells you what they thought of Deshaun Watson and what they thought of everything that was taking place. And so when they come out there and says we're going to be doing more to help with sexual awareness and all these things, or whatever it is, sexual abuse awareness, whatever, who cares what they say, right? And then the really last add on this is Watson again. It's like he apologized for anyone that he impacted, but maintains his innocence. First, rule number 1, 2022 on August 18th in America, at least in the West, you never apologize. Never apologize in public, because it'll never be enough for the media and the culture, because unless you slash your wrists in front of them, the KBM will always want more. So an apology is not good. Privately apologize to somebody? Sure, absolutely. Publicly, never apologize. And here's the thing. This is what politicians do, right? They maintain their innocence and then they apologize, right? And I hope I didn't offend anybody. Well, if it wasn't your intention to offend anybody, then don't apologize. Don't apologize, right? And do this all the time. So Watson keeps apologizing, but maintains his innocence. And the media says, well, I don't care if you apologize. You didn't apologize today. You don't apologize in the last hour. So I'm really glad I don't have to do Brown View, which would be kind of gross, right? Brown View. I don't know if that sounds right. Anyway, moving on, the Bears and Seahawks kick off week 2 of the preseason tonight. Looking forward to that. Hey, I saw an item come across just as I was clicking on that talked about Tony Dungy is ready to come out of retirement at some point. And I think they mentioned Seattle as a possible future stop. But they also mentioned the Raiders, who just hired Josh McDaniels. So kind of curious about that. And I want to know if it's true. I just saw it. It just flashed across my screen. If somebody wants to let me know if it's true, please let me know if it's true. Bears are running Justin Fields out there with no one to throw the ball to. The Seahawks are running DK Metcalf out there with no one to throw the ball to him. I think Drew Lock is out. Geno Smith's got the job, and we're going to watch. I love preseason football, and I'm not going to apologize for loving preseason football, although it seems to be like we got to apologize or make a reason up for it. No, I enjoy watching NFL football, period, and I also enjoy preseason football because I love watching players and athletes fight for their careers. I just love it. I think there's a desperation. It's not perfect football. It's not the best football, but I find when the starters are out, I find in those that are looking to maintain a career, I find a passion that you sometimes don't see in football. Football is all passion, but yeah, I'm going to watch the whole game. I'm not going to, as Coward says, I wish I was as talented as Coward, wish I was as successful as Colin Coward, but I'm not going to watch the start of the game, have a cocktail and turn it off. I'm going to watch the whole game. I mean, if I'm going to talk Ram football or I'm going to talk football, period, I think you should watch the game, right? I'm sorry. John Wolford, speaking of watching the game tomorrow night where the Rams host the Houston Texans, actually I was at the Houston Texans when they came to the Coliseum in the preseason. I think it was 2016, 2017. I don't know. Maybe it was 2017. I was actually at that game. The Rams lost it on a field goal. But the Texans are coming to town, and John Wolford is starting that game. And in a way, I feel like we called that, right? I think Bryce Perkins is not – I don't believe Bryce Perkins is going to get the number 2 job. I believe that Sean McVay made up his mind. But I think what happened is Bryce Perkins might have raised a question. Like, maybe we need to see something a little bit more. And think about significant snaps. The last time John Wolford took a significant snap in a football game was at the end of the 2020 season. You could say week 17 that he started and beat the Cardinals to get the Rams to the playoffs. Or you could say the following week in the wild card game where he got his bell rung early. But that was the last time. Think how long ago that was. That was the last time he took an important snap, a significant snap. And the idea that he wasn't going to take a snap in the preseason, I'm sorry. I know we're supposed to trust McVay. He won a Super Bowl. But no, that just doesn't make sense. And you're going to entrust, if something happens to Stafford, you're going to trust everything into a guy that hasn't thrown a pass, a significant, an important pass in 2 years. I don't know. So that's why the Wolf is playing, I think. Otherwise, why didn't he play last week? Really? I think Bryce Perkins, while I don't think he's going to get the job, I think he raised the question. Again, I'm Joe Terosian. You can follow me on Twitter at JoeT13B. I'm also that same handle on Instagram. And you can hear this on podcast on iHeartRadio and Spotify, as well as YouTube. I just ask you to subscribe to them all, leave a review, leave a star, leave a comment. I love answering questions. I don't get enough questions. I'd love to answer questions, and you can follow me in those places. Also, recently posted this morning another column called From the Ram Cave, the August 18th version, which covers a lot of what we're talking about here, and that is already posted at joeterosian.com. There we go. Did the commercial. Oh, yeah, I write books. Check it out. Type in Joe Terosian on Amazon. You can see the books I've written. I've written 2 football books, and I'm also a pastor. And I pastor a small church in Burbank, and you can catch those messages online or catch me in person on Sunday morning in Burbank. All right. So everyone's jazzed about Lance McCutcheon, and I get it. Why not be jazzed about Lance McCutcheon? Everyone is talking about Lance McCutcheon, so I'm going to keep this part of it short. What I want to talk about is but what I want to mention here is there's a standard breakdown of an offensive roster by position. You keep in the old days, they kept 2 quarterbacks, 6 running backs. This was the 70s breakdown, 4 wide receivers. And for the better part of the last 10, 12 years, it's been NFL teams keep 2 quarterbacks, 4 running backs, 6 receivers, 3 tight ends, 9 offensive linemen. So the Rams kept 3 quarterbacks on the active roster last year. Stafford, the Wolf, and Bryce Perkins, because they were afraid. There was a lot of talk. They were afraid of losing Bryce Perkins, that he wouldn't slip past the waiver wire and end up on the practice squad. So they kept him on the active roster. Last year, the Rams went into the season with 3 running backs: Darrell Henderson, Sony Michel, and Jake Funk. You remember Cam Akers was out. They went with 3 running backs instead of 4. And then, tight ends, currently you got Tyler Higbee, Kendall Blanton, Bryce Hopkins. Sean McVay generally keeps 3 tight ends, right? Johnny Munt's the odd guy out. And then 9 offensive linemen, and that's for another day. But that's an interesting conversation because, Austin Corbett was a starter at right guard last year. His backup was Coleman Shelton, but Coleman Shelton was also Brian Allen's backup. And so you look for guys that could do swing positions. Look at Tremaine Ankrum. Tremaine Ankrum is I think, a tackle by trade who's been playing guard, and he could play both guard and tackle. He did that last week, and he was actually one of the few linemen that fared modestly well. But where we're going to start is with the wide receivers. And in the old days, the wide receivers, there were 4 of them. All right. That's when I was growing up. You only needed 4 receivers because you kept 6 running backs and you just pounded the ball. You only kept 2 tight ends in those days. Of course, you're dealing with 40-man and 43-man rosters in those days as well. But to talk about the receivers, we look at the depth chart. And at the top of the Rams depth chart, the list needs no discussion, right? And the rest that we're going to mention seem like locks unless somebody gets dealt. And I still argue or contend that that's a real possibility. So Cooper Kupp, Allen Robinson, boom, we know they're good. They're there until they get hurt, right? Van Jefferson's interesting because of the glut of receivers the Rams have. If he's slow to recover, because he's had a second knee surgery, now this was just called a cleanup that they did, but I would say look for the Rams to buy some time with Jefferson by placing him on injured reserve. And the injured reserve rules have been adjusted that if you go on injured reserve, you'll miss 4 weeks. And so I wouldn't think it's out of the realm of possibility that Van Jefferson could go on IR and miss the first 4 weeks of the season and open up an extra roster slot so a decision doesn't have to be made too soon on some of these receivers. So he would be number 3. And then you get into a little more gray area there, but according to the depth chart that was released, you got Ben Skoranek. And I know people hate Ben Skoranek. You could think what you want, but Sean McVay obviously likes him. Remember when all the Rams receivers were going down, instead of Landon Akers or J.J. Koski or Warren Jackson or some of these guys the Rams had in camp, they went to Ben Skoranek. And so McVay likes him. The word is he runs his routes really well. And, of course, he plays special teams. The only issue he has is his hands, right? And so, he had some high-profile drops last year, we'll say. And apparently he's looked really good in camp. And there was a reason he was drafted in the 7th round, but he's playing well for the Rams, and McVay likes him. The number 5 spot, that 4 or 5 hybrid, depending on how you want to describe it, is Tutu Atwell. He'll fill the role Deshaun Jackson was supposed to fulfill last year. And, Jackson blew it. I mean, Deshaun Jackson, not a wise man. He always got hurt, right? He's at the end of his career, and all the Rams needed was about 5 to 10 snaps out of him a game to go deep. And it was working, but his ego got the better of him, and the Rams showed how gracious they were by giving him a ring. But that's the role I envision that Tutu Atwell is going to take this year. And he's going to be the burner in residence. And likely he's not going anywhere unless it's to the IR after a strong wind, right? That's the big question. Can he take a hit? And he's looked good in the preseason, or in the preseason he hasn't played. But in camp, he's looked really good. And so that'll be interesting to see. And then the 6th spot, you really have to think about this one. I know you want to jump to Jacob Harris, Lance McCutcheon. 6th spot's Brandon Powell. Brandon Powell is the team's number 1 return man. And this offseason, they've been incorporating Powell into packages for the offense. And so they probably want to get a little more out of him. You can't just have a roster spot just for a guy that just returns. And you'd think you would, but they want to incorporate him and get more out of him. So there you go. You got Cooper Kupp, Allen Robinson, Van Jefferson, Ben Skoranek, Tutu Atwell, Brandon Powell. Those guys are pretty much locks that they're all going to be on the roster unless somebody gets dealt. And if he was healthy, I could see Van Jefferson getting dealt. I could see a Skoranek, just for an undisclosed draft pick, right? But what do you do with these guys? Jacob Harris. Now, Jacob Harris, the guy's always hurt, right? But he was the darling of last year's preseason. He was the Nelson Spruce of 2021. He's 6'5", 219 with great speed. I've heard it reported has speed as good as 4.3 in the 40, okay? But he only caught 49 passes in college, right? He played really about 21 meaningful games at Central Florida, 26 total. And so there's him, who obviously the Rams saw something in. And then, of course, there's Lance McCutcheon. And you saw what Lance McCutcheon could do in the first week of preseason. Let me just say that one more time. You saw what Lance McCutcheon can do in the first week of the preseason, all right? There was a reason he went undrafted. If you read the scouting report on him, his hands were actually in question. His speed was in question. His best gift was he can contest for the football, and you saw that twice on last Saturday night. And so he really did what he should be doing, but he was also doing that against third-tier NFL players. So just remember that. And so don't let your heart be broken, right? Do you see the Rams keeping 8 receivers? If the Rams decide to keep 8 receivers, they'll likely have to go with 2 quarterbacks and 3 running backs, maybe even trim down on the offensive line to make that happen. You could release Perkins and maybe he slips through to the practice squad, maybe. But then what do you do about the 3 backs you start the season with, right? You're going to go with Cam Akers, you're going to go with Darrell Henderson, and you just drafted Kyren Williams, right? So what do you do with Jake Funk? So let's just say you decide Cam Akers, Darrell Henderson, and Kyren Williams are all 3 going to be your running backs on the roster. Currently, all 3 of them are banged up, and that's without taking a live action snap. The Rams need that 4th running back. And I know people like A.J. Rose, but I think between kickoff returner, special teams, and the ability to play in the offense, I think Jake Funk is the guy, which means you're going to have some pain there. So that's the top 8 guys I mentioned. Cooper Kupp, Allen Robinson, unassailable. Van Jefferson, he's unassailable. Ben Skowronek, Tutu Atwell, Brandon Powell. Boom, they're in. And then you got questions. Jacob Harris, Lance McCutcheon. Now, can you release a guy like Jacob Harris or Lance McCutcheon and expect them to get through waivers? Right. And then the rest of the roster looks like Austin Trammell, gone. J.J. Koski, gone. Landon Akers, gone. I was a little, I don't want to say perturbed, is that I posted on Twitter on Saturday night because I had never seen him play. I said, oh, man, Austin Trammell has a little bit of the Amendola in him. And then I heard a podcaster, because I listen to all the podcasts, heard a podcaster say Austin Trammell has a bit of the Amendola in him. No, sorry. So I think Austin Trammell is going, or he's going to the practice squad. J.J. Koski, the pride of Cal Poly San Luis Obispo, he's had his coffee. It's time to go. Maybe practice squad. Landon Akers. Hey, we already got an Akers on the team, and there's just, it's just too many acres, right? Too much acreage. And maybe he needs to go. Maybe he lands on the practice squad. Any one of these guys can land up on the practice squad. So let me just go that one more time because I want you to notice something. Cooper Kupp, Allen Robinson, Van Jefferson, Ben Skowronek, Tutu Atwell, Brandon Powell, Jacob Harris, Lance McCutcheon, and not the Professor and Marianne, but Austin Trammell, J.J. Koski, and Landon Akers. Oh, and by the way, there's 3 letters I left out. You know what letters are missing? OBJ. Where does OBJ figure in? Because the Rams want him. And if he comes back, is somebody going to have a cataclysmic injury that's going to make it a little bit easier to incorporate him back in? Are the Rams going to bring him back in, which I think they are? But who goes? Who stays? What if there is no catastrophic injury? What do they do? Where do they go? And who's, there's just not enough forks for everyone to eat, so to speak. All right. On this date in Ram history, we want to wish a happy birthday to former Rams cornerback Clifford Hicks, who turns 58 today. One of my favorite numbers. He was drafted by the Rams, 3rd round, 74th overall out of Oregon. Hicks was about 5'9", 190, and he spent the bulk of his career really as a punt returner. He did play parts of 4 seasons with the Rams, started 6 games. He picked off 3 passes, picked off 5 in his career. He was a backup with the Buffalo Bills. He was on 3 of their 4 Super Bowl teams. He was on the 90, 91, and 92 squads. So it's nice. He had some nice run in the NFL, returned punts for the Bills. And he spent his last 2 seasons with the Jets. And between 93 and 94, he actually had a brief offseason return to the Rams. And, of course, he was cut, didn't make it. He went back to the Jets. So happy birthday to Clifford Hicks. And also on this date in Ram history that I thought was notable, but I'm not going to get into, in 1975, wide receiver Otto Stowe retired. That's a story for another time. In 1976, on this date, the Rams waived running back Minnie Mac Haran. He had a big moment with the Patriots in 74, but by 76, it was all over for Mac. But that's a story for another time. And then on this day in 1989, tight end Pat Carter was acquired from the Detroit Lions for a 4th round draft pick, 4th round, 105 overall, 1990. I'm not even going to talk about that. But the big story on this date was something that I uncovered that maybe if I heard about it when I was younger, I would have remembered it. So I'm guessing I didn't. I got a pretty good memory for these things. But there was a lot of drama with the Rams. So on this date in Rams history, in 1977, the Rams traded Jack Hacksaw Reynolds, the middle linebacker, right? the most underrated middle linebacker in NFL history, Jack Hacksaw Reynolds, was traded by the Rams to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Yeah, say what? Did you know that, right? Think about this. After 1976, several Rams had played out their options, but of course it was this weird thing. You play out your option, but there's no free agency, right? And among them were Ron Jaworski, whose rights were dealt to the Eagles, who dealt back the rights to tight end Charlie Young. Harold Jackson was one. Tom Mack, one should be a Hall of Famer, one is a Hall of Famer. Ram legend Cullen Bryant was one of those guys. And, of course, Jaworski and Cullen Bryant were part of the 73 draft. And Jack Reynolds was the other, played out his option. So there was friction and frustration with this team. There was even some racial issues going on with this team. There always was. And after the team's third consecutive NFC title loss, remember they lost in 73 to the Cowboys, then 74 to the Vikings, 75 to the Cowboys, 76 to the Vikings in Bloomington. There was a lot of frustration. James Harris, who had led the NFL in passing in 76, was traded to the Chargers. And Joe Namath was signed that offseason going into 77 to be the Rams quarterback. And we know how that worked out. So a lot of contentiousness, and Reynolds signed his contract. But then the front office, I'm guessing Klosterman and them, probably some bad blood, I don't know. The Rams traded Jack Reynolds to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who were heading into their second NFL season. Now, they went 0-14 in 76, and they would go 0-12 in 77. They started their franchise history with an 0-26 start, and that's where Jack Reynolds got traded to. Now, I'm a big John fan. That got turned around pretty quick, but Reynolds refused to report. He just says, I'm not going, and the trade was canceled. And so you think, okay, whatever was going on, maybe it stopped, but it didn't stop there. The Rams were approached by the Washington Redskins about interest in Jack Reynolds. Now, think about this. Jack Reynolds only made 2 Pro Bowls, right? He was in 3 Super Bowls, won 2 of them. He only made 2 Pro Bowls, but here you got, the Buccaneers wanted him, John McKay, the Redskins wanted him, George Allen, and so George Allen approached the Rams. He was also acting as GM with the Redskins. And Allen was with the Rams in 1970, of course. He was still there when Reynolds was drafted in the first round of that draft out of Tennessee. So he had an interest in him. Harold McClinton had kind of his career had petered out. That was when the middle linebacker was the quarterback of the defense. And you could name every middle linebacker like you named every team's quarterback, right? That's just how it was. And so he's playing in a division with the Eagles with Bill Bergey. He's playing in the division he's played in the division with the Cowboys that were coming off Leroy Jordan, and they even tried running Randy White in there for a while. Bob Brunig, Harry Carson was there with the Giants. So there were some middle linebackers to contend with, and everyone wanted a good middle linebacker. But Skins, they didn't have the draft picks. They didn't have the draft picks or anything the Rams really wanted. And you have to remember, the reason they didn't have any of the draft picks is that because George Allen was the founding father of blank them picks. They just didn't call it that then, but Allen was the one that dealt all of his picks away. And so the Rams didn't make the deal with Allen. But 1 week later, now the trade was made August 18th, 1977. By August 25th, the Baltimore Colts entered the debate. They became a third party to a possible deal. The Colts were looking for a tough guy at middle linebacker to replace Mike Curtis, who I don't think is in the Hall of Fame and should be. They said they'd send a pick and an unnamed player to Tampa, and Tampa could send their pick or picks to the Rams, who would then send Reynolds on to Baltimore. That looks pretty good. If you remember the Colts coming out of 76, they were a contending team. They had a great front line: Joe Ehrman, Mike Barnes, John Dutton. They had Fred Cook. They had a really good front four. I think they called them the Looney Tunes, right? But their linebacking core and their defensive secondary was weak, and so they needed some toughness. And Curtis had already aged out. I think he was in Seattle at this point, and so Ted Marchibroda wanted Jack Reynolds. But of course, the problem there, while Burt Jones was the quarterback, Bob Irsay was the owner. Or is it Jim Irsay? No, Jim Irsay is now. Bob Irsay was the owner, and he was a disaster. And ultimately, that deal fell through, and Reynolds remained with the Rams through 1980. And good for the Rams, right? He was also on the 79 Super Bowl team that, played in January of 80. And but after the 1980 season, the Rams let him go. 11 seasons in LA, the Rams let him go. And in 1981, that year, the Rams let him go, and he signed with the San Francisco 49ers. And that very same season in 81, Jack Reynolds won a Super Bowl. And then he won a Super Bowl again in 1984. And there's just a lot to talk about with Jack Reynolds beyond why his nickname is Hacksaw. He was an exceptional player. And he's the first one to say he wasn't fast. He wasn't anything special. But this guy was focused, and this guy watched film day and night. Here are the things Ronnie Lott says about Jack Reynolds and the things he learned from him. Jack Reynolds is a pretty special player. So as we wrap it up here at the 25-minute mark, where we've gone a little bit long, I have one final ongoing thought. These are the players and draft picks that the Rams let slip through their hands. Jack Reynolds, Wendell Tyler, Charles Haley, Steve Wallace, and Bryant Young. The Rams have done the 49ers so many favors. And when you look at that 49er dynasty, just a small part, maybe you can carve out about 5% and give credit to Georgia Frontiere and the Rams. Just saying. All right, guys, thank you so much for letting me share that story. I'm Joe Tarosian, and this is RamView, and we will be back tomorrow getting ready for the Rams-Texans, and how exciting. Great to be talking football. Take care. God bless. Check us out on all the platforms, and we'll see you tomorrow. Take care.